I want to talk to you for a little bit about drawing ellipses. Ellipses are extremely important to an artist for a lot of reasons. Probably the quickest way for a trained artist to recognize someone who doesn't have training in art or does not have a good natural eye is poor ellipses. Whether it's the top of a cup, the shape of a wheel, or a dinner plate, or other forms that relate to ellipses. It's very important to have an understanding of how to draw ellipses. So let me shift this camera down to the page and walk you through some things that you can do to improve your ability to draw ellipses. All right. First of all, if you're struggling with drawing ellipses, I recommend, and don't tell my fellow art teachers this, but I really do recommend getting an elliptical template and tracing ellipses. Different shapes of ellipses. This is a fat ellipse, as if you're looking at a cup type of a object, but you're looking at it at a steep angle. If you bring that cup up and look at it at an angle that is more acute, then it's going to be a narrower ellipse. But you need to feel an ellipse. By the way, these elliptical templates you find in drafting stores. They're not particularly expensive. And I just lost my lead, so go to plan B. And draw ellipses until you're just sick of them. Repeating ellipse after ellipse. And what's going to happen is, after a while, you're going to feel an ellipse. You know when they're correct because they feel right, even if they're a fatter ellipse. So tracing ellipses can be a good way to practice recognizing a good ellipse. So I'm going to show you a very technical, mechanical way to draw an ellipse, and you're not going to be doing this way in reality as a freehand artist. One time in my 50 plus years of doing art, I graduated about that many decades ago, one time I actually created the ellipse of a wagon. It was a commissioned painting, and I was really struggling getting the wagon on a horse-drawn wagon to feel right. And so I actually drew a vertical rectangle, square, and divided it up into a 12-point ellipse in order to get it right. Maybe that was just my eye wasn't that developed. So here's what you do. So I'm going to walk you through how to draw a circle. Yeah, a freehand circle by identifying 12 points around the perimeter of a circle. And I'm going to show you this simply to illustrate what you have to do to draw an ellipse. Because an ellipse isn't drawn in a square. It's drawn in a rectangular form, a perspective rectangular form. So first of all, we have a square. I pre-drew that square, and I want to find the center of the square. How do you find the center of a square or a rectangle? Well, any construction person can tell you. You find the center of a rectangle by drawing diagonals from corner to corner. And so I can draw a couple of light diagonals, and there's my center. Now I want to, and I'm just going to eyeball this now. I'm not going to use my drafting triangle to make everything precise, but I'm going to subdivide this. I'm going to make these lines darker than I would if I were trying to figure out how to draw a rectangle, or I mean an ellipse or a circle here. But I want you to be able to see these. So I'm going to split this actually into 4 quadrants. I have to draw another diagonal here on this half, which gives me the center point, and then I can draw that, split it in half. I don't need to do that one because I already have my center points this way. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line across here. I do need to draw this diagonal, which gives me the center point here. So now I've got these 4 quadrants this way, and I need to draw one diagonal here to get the center of that top half, and draw a line across, and again a diagonal here. This is the diagonal of this bottom half to find the center of this half. Once I've established that, I can draw a line across. Now that's a lot of work to get what I'm looking for, and what I'm looking for is this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant, and this quadrant. So what I'm going to do now in each of those outside quadrants, and by the way, I didn't get this line right here drawn quite vertical. A little technical here. All right, what I want to do now, and listen carefully, is I want to draw diagonals in this outside quadrant. I'm going to draw these darker than what I would otherwise want so you can see them. But I'm drawing a diagonal here. And again, this is just in this outside quadrant. By the way, you anchor your pencil on one end of the ruler and then line the other one up. Draw. Now, I've got an X in this quadrant. Now I'm going to walk around the thing, drawing an X in each of these quadrants, and I'm hoping this is all on my camera. If it isn't, I'm going to have to reshoot this whole thing. So I'm just walking around drawing diagonals in each of these quadrants, and it begins to look a little complex, but there are more lines here than well, you just don't need to worry about a lot of them. Remember, I've drawn a square, I've divided the square into quadrants both ways, vertically and horizontally, and now in the outside quadrant I'm just drawing diagonals. And when I get those diagonals drawn, I have this really, it's kind of a nice geometric pattern, isn't it? Now you'll notice in each of these outside areas there's a series of crisscrosses, and what I want to do is identify there's 3 places within each of these squares, these corner squares. There are 3 places where these lines crisscross, and I want the outside 2. Then in this square down here, hope you can see that, I want the outside 2, don't want that one. Coming over here, I want the outside 2 of these 3 crisscrosses, and the outside 2. So now I have 9 of those circled, and I also want the middle of each side. The middle of this side, the middle of this side, the middle of this side, and the middle of this side. Now, I don't know how well you can see that on my video, but what I now have is a series of points that if I just connect them working around the page, it's easier for me to rotate this page than it is to bend my head around, but I'm just doing a dot to dot now. That's a pretty good circle, pretty accurate circle. Okay, so big deal. I could draw a circle with a circle template. Or I could pick up any bottle and just trace a bottle. Or I could use a compass. Yeah, that's right. But none of those are going to work in drawing a perspective ellipse. So now let's apply what we just did with the square to a perspective shape. And so what I need now is a eye level line or horizontal line. Again, I'm going to draw these darker than I need because I want the camera to see it. I'm going to put a vanishing point on both sides of that. And now I'm going to draw, and it's just going to be an arbitrary perspective square, if you will, or perspective rectangle. So I'm going to draw this line pretty light. I'm going to come out here and draw another line, anchoring at my vanishing point. So I'm drawing these 4 lines off to my vanishing point. I'm deliberately drawing them a little bit on the light side. And since I'm not trying to replicate any real world shape, you can see now I have a perspective rectangle. 2-point linear perspective rectangle. Let me darken the lines that make up the rectangle and leave the lines going to the vanishing points, leave them light. Now some of you are way ahead of me right now because you can see how this connects, no pun intended, to the square I just drew. So what I want to do is divide this into 4 quadrants this way, 4 quadrants this way. And how do I divide it into quadrants? Well, I simply draw from corner to corner, and where those crisscross, I missed that. As again, psychologically, that center. And here's an important concept. Look at the difference. The center of that, the perspective, the real world center, the perspective center of this is way back here. So the front half is very large compared to the back half. It's called foreshortening. So what we're seeing now is this foreshortening in a square, in a perspective square. And so I've created that middle point. And so now I'm going to draw a perspective line through that middle point and split my square in half. So now what I need to do is find the center of this half, and I can use my center point and vanishing point to locate that. That's the center of this quadrant, or that half I should say. Now I go from my vanishing point out to or across that. Now I need to find the center of the back quadrant. And again, draw a line there. I can do this with diagonals, or I can draw to my vanishing point. Either way, they're going to intersect at the same point. So from my vanishing point, by the way, this is, if you're not used to drawing in linear perspective, this is a good basic introduction to 2-point linear perspective. There's my 4 quadrants. 4 quadrants of a square. Now I have 4 quadrants of a perspective rectangle, but the quadrant closest to me is thicker. Now that's half of the job. Now I need to draw the quadrants going in the other direction. What I really need are just the outside 4 quadrants, remember that. So there's my middle point, larger and smaller halves because it's in perspective. Draw a diagonal, find my middle point here, use my vanishing point, the right vanishing point, and draw through that center point. And my lead keeps breaking when my pencil drops into a pinhole in my drawing table. And I have one more. I've got to find the center point of the back side of this, which is right there. Again, use my vanishing point, and now I have done in perspective exactly what I did with the square. 4 quadrants this way and 4 quadrants this way. Now we're almost home free, aren't we? We're going to draw diagonals in each of the outside quadrants. So I'm going to draw a diagonal here. And if you draw these really, really light, you can erase them. They'll just be virtually invisible. Because remember, we're just looking for 12 points. This is the 12-point elliptical process. So I'm just walking around the outside quadrants and drawing diagonals. Don't worry about all the extra lines. Just draw diagonals in each of the 4 outside quadrants. And you're thinking, what on earth does this have to do with fine art and freehand drawing? Well, nothing directly, but everything indirectly. Because what we're witnessing is what happens in reality when you project a real-world shape onto a 2-dimensional surface. You get perspective. So now we've got the same thing we had now in the squares. We've got these diagonals in this rectangle, diagonals in this rectangle, this outside one, diagonals in this one, diagonals in this one, and they crisscross at 3 points. And I want the center point on each side plus the outside intersections of the 4 corner squares. So let's look at this one. The middle, the middle, the middle, and the middle. Those 4. Now there are 3 intersections here. I want this one, and Keller, you don't want that one. Don't misteach. I want the outside 2, those 2. You're way ahead of me, aren't you? I want the middle and the middle here, and I need this one and this one. There are 3 here. I want these outside 2. Over here, I want this one and this one. Ignore the 3rd one. This one and this one. Now, we're just about home free. Dot to dot. And here's the critical part of an ellipse, is that parabolic curve right there. That parabolic curve has to feel right. That's where tracing these is a good idea. And again, that parabolic curve right here. And there we have it. I'm going to go over this a few more times just so you can, it's dark enough that the camera picks it up. There's our ellipse in perspective. Now, if I had drawn this rectangle closer to the horizon line, that would be a much, looking at this, looking straight down, this is a circle. But as I look at it at this angle, it's an ellipse. In fact, that ellipse, with my hand looking at that tape, is about the same angle as this ellipse. If I move this up so it's closer to eye level, it becomes a much thinner ellipse. As I move it down, it becomes a fatter ellipse. As I move it over, it distorts in one direction. Move it this way, it distorts in the other direction. So your assignment is to draw a 12-point linear perspective circle. And while you're at it, fill up a page of perfect ellipses. Now, I've got some elliptical templates. I can bring them to class and you can draw ellipses to your heart's content. When you're in the sophomore portfolio review and you've got your still life set up there on the wall and you've got a bad ellipse in it, one of the teachers is going to call your attention to that bad ellipse. They just stick out like a sore thumb to an artist with a trained eye. So those are a couple of things to improve your ability to draw an ellipse. By the way, you can do the same thing by drawing a vertical elliptical shape. And now it's a wheel, but you're looking at the wheel or the windmill or whatever it is standing up instead of laying down. A lot of potential there.